Hey everyone, let's talk about the new rules that apply if you want to work while collecting Social Security benefits in 2025. Now, this is known as the earnings limit, and today I'm going to cover specifically those rules that are effective for 2025. And I'm also going to answer some of the big questions that I get asked, like, does the Social Security Administration look at single or joint income? What happens to benefits that are withheld if you go over the earnings limit? How is the earnings limit actually applied to a benefit? And when does the limit switch from an annual limit to a monthly limit? And then, should you tell the Social Security Administration if you're over the limit? And then, will the earnings limit affect spousal or children's benefits? And then the big one, what actually counts as earnings? Now, before we jump into that, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. You don't want to miss any of the new videos that we have coming out in the year ahead. I want to tell you, in the near future, we're going to start seeing a lot of changes to Social Security. Now, this isn't a maybe. It has to happen. And if any of it gets close to law, I'm going to make a video about it right here. Oh, one other thing, too. If you haven't checked out my podcast yet, you should. This is Big Picture Retirement, where we get into more depth about not just Social Security, but cover the big picture of all the stuff you need to know about retirement, from investing to taxes to estate planning. And you can find that podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Just be sure when you go there to hit that follow or subscribe button, so you're going to be notified when a new episode is released. Okay, so the way I want to approach this video is to jump right into the numbers that are effective for Social Security retirement benefits in 2025, and then I'll answer the big questions that I get all the time on the earnings limit. Now, you do want to stay tuned for these questions, because this is what's going to tie it all together and make it make sense. So before we jump into the earnings limit rules, there are two things that you need to know. So first, the rules that we're discussing today only apply to Social Security retirement benefits, not SSI and not Social Security disability benefits. Those two programs have a different set of rules. And the second thing you have to know, that these rules only apply before your full retirement age. Once you reach full retirement age, there is no limit on earnings. So it is pretty important to know when your full retirement age is, because it can be different depending on your year of birth. So for everyone that was born in 1954 or earlier, the full retirement age is 66. And then for every year after that, it increases by 2 months until birth year 1960, at which point the full retirement age is 67. And under current law, and again, that's current law, that's where it's going to stay. So with that background, here are the limits. If you make more than $23,400 in 2025, the Social Security Administration will withhold $1 in benefits for every $2 over that amount that you earn. Now, the one exception is during the calendar year you attain full retirement age. During that period, the earnings limit that will apply to you nearly triples to $62,160. The withholding amount on dollars earned over that limit is not as steep in that year either. For every $3 over the limit, the Social Security Administration withholds $1 in benefit. So that's the earnings limit. But you know, that really is a very simplified explanation that, if you're like any of my other audience members, you probably now have more questions than you do answers. So let's get into the ones that you're probably thinking about in your head right now. So first, does the Social Security Administration look at single or joint income? You know, most married couples are used to having all of their household income counted together in one big pot. So, for example, if you file your taxes as married filing jointly, earnings from both spouses are counted together to determine how much you owe in taxes. So it does make sense to wonder, what happens if a spouse earns more than the Social Security income limit? How does that affect your benefits if you want to file early? Well, the simple but not fully complete answer is that joint income is not what's counted. The earnings test is an individual test. So if you are married and you each receive Social Security benefits from work you performed, your spouse's excess earnings, exceeding that earnings limit, cannot turn off your benefits. Again, though, that's as long as the benefits that you receive come from your own work history. So, for example, let's say that a wife goes back to work. Now, that may affect her benefit payment, but it won't affect the husband's benefit payment. But here's where this can get a little tricky. If anyone is collecting benefits from your work, let's say a spousal benefit, and you have excess earnings, that spousal benefit will be affected. And the same for children's benefits. Now, the exception to this is for an ex-spouse. An ex-spouse's excess earnings cannot affect your Social Security benefits. So the next question is, what happens to withheld benefits? Well, if your benefits are withheld from the earnings limit, they aren't gone forever. At your full retirement age, the administration will run a calculation that's called the ARF, the adjustment to the reduction factor. This says that your ongoing permanent benefit can only be reduced for those months that you received a Social Security check. So the months where you didn't receive a benefit due to being over the income limit won't count against your reduction because of early filing. So here's how this works. When you file early, your benefits are reduced by a reduction factor. Now that reduction factor is 0.5% for the 36-month period immediately preceding your full retirement age, and 0.5% for months in excess of 36. Now, if you want to just average this for a little back of the envelope math, you can just say that each month of early filing will reduce your benefit by about 0.5%. That's not completely precise, but it's close enough. So for every month you don't receive your benefit, that 0.5% is added back to your benefit at full retirement age when they run the calculation. And the next question, how is the earnings limit actually applied? Well, if you exceed the earnings limit, the Social Security Administration will withhold several months of benefits at a time. So, for example, let's say you have a monthly benefit of $2,000 and that you're going to be over the earnings limit by $10,000. So with a withholding amount of $1 for every $2 over the limit, this means that $5,000 in benefits should be withheld. So they're going to withhold your benefit payment from January, February, and March. And then in April, your checks would resume. So should you tell the Social Security Administration if you're going to be over the limit? Yes. If you're going to be over the limit, you do need to contact the administration and let them file a work report with the new estimated earnings. Now, this will result in benefits being withheld, but I can assure you of this. You do not want to get into an overpayment situation and try to unravel those letters that you're going to receive from the administration. And look, some of those letters may not show up until 4 or 5 years or later down the road. And trying to go back and figure out what those letters even say with that much water under the bridge is extremely difficult. I've seen dozens of these letters over my career, and none of them make sense. All right, so when does the limit switch from an annual limit to a monthly limit? Well, thankfully, the administration does recognize that some people retire mid-year after they've already had earnings that were over the annual income limit. Now, for these individuals, there is a monthly income limit. The Social Security website says that the monthly earnings test applies when an entitled beneficiary has one or more non-service months in a grace year. So here's what that means. In the first year that you receive Social Security benefits and have a month of earnings that is less than the monthly earnings limit amount, the income limit turns into a monthly income test. Now that runs in a calendar year. And after that, it's back to the annual test. And then to calculate what that monthly income limit is, it's simply the applicable annual limit in that year divided by 12. So will the earnings limit affect spousal or children's benefits? Now, we talked about this briefly before, but I do want to reiterate this. If your benefit is stopped because you are over the limit, it will affect both your benefits and any benefits paid from your benefits. So if anyone is collecting benefits from your work and you have excess earnings, their benefits will also be affected. So to go over an example again, if your wife, let's say, is collecting a spousal benefit and you go over the limit, both your benefit and her spousal benefit will be suspended. Now, again, there is an exception for ex-spouses there, because an ex-spouse cannot turn off their ex-spouse's benefit by going over the limit. So what kind of income counts as earnings? Now, the big question that most people have about the income limit is just that. Devin, what actually counts as income in the eyes of the Social Security Administration? So while a lot of the ins and outs of the Social Security benefit system seem sometime to be designed just for purposes of being confusing, in this case, the Social Security Administration does make it easy to understand for most of the common types of income that's normally received. So the most common types of income that will not count towards the income limit includes pension payments, most annuity payments, money from IRAs and other retirement account distributions, dividends, interest income, and capital gains. The income that does count against you when looking at the earnings limit is gross wages from employment income and net earnings from self-employment. And plus, there are some additional rules on the time you can spend in the business in that first year if you're self-employed. So that covers the basics on the income limit for 2025. If you have questions, be sure to leave them down in the comments below. I know I don't always get a chance to respond, but I do try to read them all. And before you leave, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and let the robots at YouTube know that it has value and it needs to be shared with other people. Thanks so much for watching.